So, Callum, what kind of ruler would Podrick Payne be?
No clue. I don't know. I never know these.
A dictator.
I just had a sip of my drink in disgust.
Hello and welcome to day 3 of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar, or hello and welcome to day 4 of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar. We are back after a year off. We're back with Game of Thrones with season 5. We are now in the second half of the show, which is the bad half, if you ask anyone with sense. And since we finished the season 4 reviews last year, I have read all of the books on Audible. I started it on, I think it was either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day last year, just after the Advent Calendar ended in 2022. I started reading the audiobooks for A Game of Thrones, then A Clash of Kings, then A Storm of Swords, then A Feast for Crows, then A Dance with Dragons. And you'll notice that earlier this year on the channel, I did a live stream ranking all of the A Song of Ice and Fire characters. So if anyone is interested in that, you can go check that out on the channel. That was a whole lot of fun. One of the best videos I've ever done solo. Usually I like having another person because I don't like doing videos by myself. That was one of my favorite ones I've ever done solo. So I had so much to talk about and it was like 4 hours. But the good thing about reading all the books is it means going into the seasons where they start to really deviate from the source material, which is from here, I will have full context. And boy, oh boy, I can say I don't know what the fuck they were doing, but here we are. This is where Dave and Dan decided to take the show. You get a little glimpse of their vision at the end of season 4, if you remember, all those months ago. Callum? In that last episode, which we both gave a 3 out of 10, which was the children.
Yes, it was pretty bad.
Yep.
It was very bad.
So, coming off that finale, going into season 5, what are your thoughts and anticipations?
God, I think, I can't remember if I said it when we ended off season 4, but I've now pretty much on edge for when the show is going to truly tank, because I know it tanks. I'm just wondering how sooner than expected is it going to be, because I am just quite worried with how they handled the ending and how they handled a lot of characters in the final episode of last season. Not just Tyrion, but a bunch of other characters who made very odd decisions that doesn't really feel in line with what we've learned about them, and there's been no evidence to support those changes. So going forward, I'm quite nervous about characters specifically, not just the plot, because I think, let's be honest, this show's strong point is its characters. So when those start to tank, when those characters start to make decisions that don't make sense for who they are and don't go on journeys to be able to get to those decisions the writers want, that's when you're going to start seeing a lot more problems, and that's when you're going to see a lot more of this show probably get very frustrating to watch. And I'm wondering if that's going to happen this season, majority of the time, or if that will be later seasons down the road. I don't know. I only know the badge of Game of Thrones season 8, so this is all going to be quite new in terms of now going into the era of this show that's not as well regarded. So yeah, that's my sort of thought process right now when thinking about the second half of this show.
I say that though, there are still a couple of characters that are great at this point that we've gotten to. Reek, also known as Theon Greyjoy in season 4, was exceptional.
Yep.
He's
been one of the strongest characters in the show, I would say. Really, really interesting character.
apart from obviously when his sister tried to rescue him at the Dreadfort, but that was the only
That
real
was stupid.
bugger.
That was very stupid, unfortunately.
And then the other side of that was Sansa and Littlefinger in season 4 were fantastic as well.
Yes, that was also quite good. That was quite good stuff.
Yep. And for the most part, Jon Snow's story has been really strong.
Yes, it has been. It's probably been, other than the Starks and the Lannisters story, that's probably been the best consistent stories of the show. And I think, and it sort of felt like last season was sort of like the end of that sort of arc. In a sense of, obviously, with Jon, you know, a lot of stuff happened to him, and he lost a lot of people, and it was quite, yeah.
You also had the death of Tywin Lannister, and he was one of the major players in that storyline.
Yes, he was the most powerful character in the show, realistically and figuratively, and losing him is also a big. Not only is it a shame just because you're losing such a great actor in Charles Dance, you're also losing such a great character who, whenever he has a scene with anybody, it's always a scene that you need to fully pay attention to and really listen to the dialogue and listen to like what this interaction means and what it could mean going forward. So that's going to be a massive miss, I think. And like characters like Jaime and Cersei and Tyrion, because obviously that event will affect him going forward, but he obviously won't be in King's Landing, I imagine. It'd be weird if he was. Those characters going forward are going to be very interesting, but I'm not that confident in them being consistent going forward without him. That is a worry, especially with how, obviously, he died, how Tywin died.
Now, it is generally agreed that A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons are not on the same level as the first 3 books. They are a tier below them, for sure. And there's many reasons for that. Structure, and just some of the bloated chapters, and the world building getting a little bit excessive. And most notably what you just mentioned, the loss of some of the more crucial characters. But the difference is the setup for those books actually makes sense. Whereas, as we saw in the last episode of season 4, a lot of those events that happened at the end of A Storm of Swords are changed. And it's because of where Dave and Dan wanted to take the show after season 4. Which means that they had a much different vision for how to adapt the story going forward than the books did. And part of that is fair because those last 2 books are so fucking massive that getting it into a TV show of this format is damn near impossible. However, there is still the final product of what did they do instead. And that's what we need to judge, really. Is that I don't expect it to be the same as A Feast for Crows and A Dance of Dragons, but I would expect it to be good, at the very least. Now, I will say, going forward for the next few seasons, there are actually some bright moments. So it's not all doom and gloom. You do have some stuff to look forward to. Some little hidden diamonds in the rough here and there. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This is a rough journey. The rest of this show. This is a very, very frustrating, and it's tough. It's a tough one because you're watching such a great story sort of slowly crumble before your eyes. Yeah. And I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say about this season.
Yeah, it's because how it's always described to me from people that have watched this show and think similarly to how we think. It's more of a gradual killing. It's more of a gradual infection from what I have gathered from how people have talked about the second half of this show. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how the little bits here and there that don't fit right with the quality and the consistency of the first half, and how that slowly is going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and how much that affects the strongest points of this show. which is the characters.
Well, it's things like, if I were to describe it like an infection, the stuff like, changing Jane to Tazer and the Karth storyline, the way that was changed, and some of the stuff they did with Stannis, and also, there's little bits and pieces, and then a lot of the stuff that they did.
This show is not without, even so far, this show has not been without its flaws. It's had issues, but they've never been so damning that the quality of the show overall has dipped massively. It's this until the last episode of season 4, which was if you were to be like, we're about to watch season 5, this is brand new, and we've not seen the rest of the show, we would probably be thinking here and discussing that that's probably a blip, and that happens. But because we now know, and it's well known, how this show ends and where it goes, that sort of worry is just going to be them. It's that fear of when is it going to really tank? When is it really going to start falling off the cliff? You've also got the fact that this story relies so much on cause and effect and continuation. Yes. Because, for example, emphasis on that, yeah.
If I was to use an analogy, like to a comparison, right after Hellbent, you have Series 10. And the show is able to exist with a good quality, despite the fact that it comes right after one of the worst episodes.
Yeah, despite there being damage forever, they're still, you can still work towards the show being of a decent and to good quality. And that's what you hope after an episode like we just watched, that they can pick it back up, start rebuilding a couple of things. And if you take something that is bad, at the very least, try and make something good out of it. It's something that I think are like a lot of people, I think specifically more so in the Doctor Who community online, this sort of idea of wanting to ignore things, that seems a lot more prevalent, especially something like The Timeless Child, for example. But there's aspects of that you can use to create good drama and good content.
I'll give you
that's what I want from this example with Game of Thrones. I would want them to make good content out of that poor thing they did.
Yeah.
It's going to be incredibly hard and they have to put a lot of work into it, but it is possible. You can absolutely do it.
Well,
whether they do or not is what we will see.
There's an example that you have seen in this show where they actually do that. So the build-up to Tazer and Robb Stark's marriage in season 2 is not very well written. It has a lot of...
No, it's not.
It's just not
it's
right.
Quite weak.
However,
it's really quite weak, I would say, compared to a lot of other relationships in the show.
Despite that storyline ends with the Red Wedding, and it's exceptional.
Yes.
It's the best episode in the show.
Because of cause and effect. Because of the cause and effect that they've built up to in the first 3 seasons of the show, and how strong Robb is as a character, and Caitlin is as a character, and a lot of other characters in that scene, that moment still pays off extremely well. And just the notion of a woman that Robb loves dying with his unborn child, that is just, it's great drama, but it's also just like, you feel for him, and it's really well built up to. Really
also,
is.
the detail, because if you remember, the last appearance they had before the Red Wedding was in an episode written by George R. R. Martin, and he added that detail of she was writing a letter to her mother to tell her that she was about to have a child right before she's killed. So they fixed it. In season 3, they managed to fix it, and they did it really well.
They managed to turn it around, which is we should applaud for the writers if they do fuck up, they turn something off that into something good.
The other things they did really well in season 3 to patch it up was using her as a great way to aid the story. So number one, because she's a nurse, she was able to resurrect Qyburn, which has had a massive effect on the King's Landing storyline, unintentionally by her. The other thing is that because of Robb's infatuation with his wife, it's led Roose Bolton to just basically go through with his decision to betray him, because he can see that he clearly doesn't care about his house. He cares more about the love of his life than the future of the Bolton household, which causes Roose Bolton to side with Tywin Lannister. So in season 3, they took a romance that wasn't very well built up to the marriage and turned it into something great. So they do have that ability.
Absolutely they do.
But now we're in season 5, so yeah. We're at this point now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else you want to say before we get into the first episode, which is called The Wars to Come?
No, I think we've said everything. I think I'm ready to embark on the second half.
I think it's quite fitting it's called The Wars to Come, given that it's about to be a war between us and Dave and Dan for the next 4 seasons.
Yes, indeed.
You're going to see some... I would say in the vast majority of the episodes that we have left, I will have some pretty hefty rants. There's I think, actually, thinking about it, really thinking about it, for the rest of this show, we've got, I think it's 33 episodes or something like that. I think it's like 33 episodes left.
Do this 33 more times.
Out of those 33 episodes, there's probably like 1 or 2 of them that I quite like. That's pretty. That's not a high number.
That is quite damning.
Yep, but it is what it is. Not saying they're all terrible. Some of them are all right.
No,
but in terms of like good episodes overall, it's oh yeah, good luck. And when it comes, there is actually one season we have left that we haven't watched that's really, really, really popular with the mainstream. But I have a lot of hot takes on that season. But we still have that in our future. But for now, we have season 5, episode 1, The Wars to Come.
HBO, the land of good content.
It's been way too long.
Did I just see Charles Dance? Did I just see Charles Dance's name in the title?
You did see.
Huh. Okay. So I'm assuming flashback then? No. Oh, it's not burning anymore.
And look, it's got the Bolton banner on it.
Oh,
it's got the flayed man.
Oh no. Oh dear.
This title sequence is still amazing though. It'll always have
really
that.
Good. This is still a very good opening to a TV show.
And the music in this show never gets bad. It's always great.
No.
Oh, we haven't been here in a long time.
No,
we haven't been to Pentos since season 1. Oh yeah, this shithole again. I forgot about Marine.
The land of lack of character. That's how I really describe it. It's the part of the show that just lacks any character.
I'm gonna lock my dragons away and cry. Boo! Fuck you!
No.
Fuck you for ruining this great show.
How are you gonna explain your dresses being all muddy then? I feel like this actress could play like a young Cersei.
Tell me mine.
Maybe this is Cersei. Okay, I think it is Cersei, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you didn't do the palm. I hate it when people do that.
Yep.
Come on, we have to go. We have to go. Cersei!
Mm-hmm. Good casting.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who looks like a lot younger version of Cersei. Another funeral.
This is also the point in the books when Cersei becomes a POV character, so she gets a lot to do.
Right. Now this scene is very important.
Yes, do not fuck this up this time.
Definitely not disastrous like that other scene.
Yeah, they didn't rape each other.
This is a good shot. That was really cool. That was good direction.
Mm-hmm. He's got a beard now.
He didn't have one. Yeah. How?
He had a stubble
Yeah, he
when he
definitely
left.
didn't have one. The end of. He definitely did not have a full-on beard.
He had a slight stubble
last season. Yeah, but that's a full-on beard.
Mm.
I cannot say I feel overly guilty about leaving you in that fucking crate.
Do you know what it's like?
I've seen that 100 times.
The Harpy?
I guess that's getting replaced.
Now, if this story made sense, that would have happened in season 4, but they couldn't afford the budget for this scene yet.
That looked alright.
Yeah. Oh, it's cool, but it just should have happened earlier.
He just wants to be held.
That's pretty fucking sad, to be honest. That is a sad life. He's paying for this. Paying for something that should be free.
I forget, they had their, like, genitals cut off, right? Or am I thinking of something else?
That's right. Yep, they have. That's why they called Unsullied.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought that, yeah. Oh, God.
Oh, what does we have here? We have a
That
harpy.
wasn't it. No, that's it. You paid that to get held, and now you're choking on your blood.
I do not know. Must go.
I think you do, mate. I think you do.
Yep. That was very good subtle acting from him there.
That
Before
was.
he said
That was
that?
actually really, really. That was
Yeah.
really subtle.
The king wants a word.
Hello.
Oh, yeah. Time for a chat off.
Ah, yes, Stannis. He's also arrived at the wall last season.
Yep. Stannis, who was trusted to be king by who? Ned Stark.
His father.
Are you a virgin?
God, no. Definitely not.
Good.
Attack, my lord! Attack!
He's so
Quite
useless.
a nice cut to from the beginning of the last scene to this scene.
He swings a sword like a girl with palsy.
My lord,
Jesus.
where would I go?
I don't care. I'm not your mother.
Man just wants a job.
Mhm.
These are hard times.
He just wants to be loyal. Oh, he approaches.
You told Lord Royce we were going to the Fingers.
I did.
Who are they just talking about?
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, wow. That's quite convenient. Oh, my fuck. Come on. Really? They're literally just talking about it, and just so happen at that time they're walking by.
I guess
Really?
I guess geographically they are close.
Yes, but literally as they talk about Sansa. Come on. As long if they don't interact, that's fine. It's just a bit of a. All right. I guess they don't. Yeah. Yeah, that could have been a lot worse. If they interacted, I would have had a massive problem.
Your father was a force to be reckoned with. He truly was.
You gotta stop, mate.
Presume
It's not gonna
to
happen.
claim to have known him as such, but just being in his presence was enough to make it so clear.
Stop pretending like the wedding's gonna happen.
Stop pretending that you care that much.
To be reckoned with.
Thank you so much for your kind words.
At this point, surely you're like, okay, I'm gay and she doesn't even like me just in general, so should I just not bother?
Well, what have we here?
Oh god, this is very... a lot of things you can put as an analogy for this.
Yep.
It's just a phase.
It wasn't my wounds that needed healing.
What can I do for you?
He's so different.
He looks very different without long hair.
There was the king. His bow hunt. His wine.
I made him very drunk. Have you read about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? Do you think they like each other?
I think we would have a lovely time.
Yep.
Dawn. High garden.
Imagine someone just walked in right now. Oh wow! Just as I said that. But it's someone who knows, to be fair.
You're very respectful.
I'm very hungry.
So are they.
Hungry for Dornish men.
Mm.
Like Oberyn Martell.
She says carry on, I swear to God. Okay.
I mean, Oliver did fuck Oberyn, if you remember.
Like other siblings, they also have a very strange relationship in this show. His fucking face.
Seven Kingdoms need someone stronger than Tommen, but gentler than Stannis. A monarch who can intimidate the High Lords and inspire the people. A ruler loved
Who could
by
also
millions
burn
with a powerful
children.
army.
Good luck finding him.
Who said anything about him?
How clever.
I hate this scene. This is so out of character. This is not what Varys would want. Oh, Varys!
What, you mean sticking? You mean he doesn't stick to the shadows? Is that why he does?
As in, why would he back that person? Anyway, I'll talk about it later.
No, but Varys was doing that all along.
I'm not a politician. I'm a queen.
Forgive me.
Yes. No, they
But-
just did the deed. And they're just casually doing it now.
He is a very, very good-looking man.
He is. I wish the show would use him more because the actor is fucking great.
So they sold me to a man in Tolos.
He's certainly big now. God damn those muscles.
I've been eating nothing but chicken breasts and brown rice for 3 months, Khaleesi.
I don't want another child's bones dropped at my feet. No one's seen Dragon in weeks.
That's funny. Oh, that is fucking hilarious. She doesn't want it dropped. She wants to do it herself.
I hope no one forgets that scene. Especially-
Very interesting wording she used in terms of what her motivation is and what she values.
It's almost like what she just said is very consistent with what's been established so far.
Anyway, I'm sure that won't come back in 4 seasons.
I can't believe they did an entire arc in season 4 that was completely ignored. I just can't believe it.
So the dragons have learnt the skill of stealth, clearly.
Well, I think they're asleep.
Oh no, they're still pissed. Okay. God, that story just continues to be nothing. I always appreciate characters with obviously differing values clashing. It's always a scene that very much interests me.
Understandable values too. Your initial thoughts on the wars to come?
Very mixed. I'm very mixed on it. I think there was quite a few scenes that I thought were good, and I thought there were a couple scenes that I felt were quite lacking. This episode lacks, other than probably that last scene, which I think the last sort of 10 minutes of the episode, 10, 11 minutes, was probably my favourite part of the episode. Quite easily. I think everything to do with the wall, I think, was probably the strongest part of the episode. Because, as I said just now at the end of the episode, we clearly know, for me anyway, who the best character is currently, and it's Jon.
Well, at least characters that appeared in the episode, yes.
Yes, characters that appeared in the episode anyway. I really liked those last, 10 minutes quite a lot. I thought there was a lot of really great character in there, and John especially, I think, was very strong in this episode for when he was on screen. That conversation that they had, I thought was, as I said just before he got burned, I really enjoy characters that have different values and different ideals and different, like, perspectives clashing in a scene and just having really good dialogue. It's just, you know, it's always fascinating rather than, you know, a big action scene or funny comedy or characters, you know, trying to be whatever. That scene, I think, yeah, was definitely the best part of the episode for me. And the act of John making it as painless as he could for him, I thought was a great moment. I really enjoyed it. I thought that was a really great... It's almost like a re-establishment of who John is. And, you know, I thought it was great. Other than that, there was some bits that I thought were decent, and I thought there was other stuff that I thought was lacking or quite lame.
It was like a cow's back. It was very patchy, wasn't it?
It has a reintroduction to a season of television. This lacks a lot. Other than the last 10 minutes, this was very lacking in character.
When you got a Jenga tower and it gets real high and you're starting to get a little wobbly.
Yeah, when we got to about 32 minutes in, like pretty much over halfway, I was like, this episode is not a lot. I'm not expecting a lot to like happen, but there's a lack of real, other than probably Cersei, there's a lack of character. There really is. Other than obviously the stuff for the wall, which was very clearly the most character-based stuff of this episode. King's Landing, okay, we'll get into more detail, but yeah, there was stuff like King's Landing I thought had decent bits, but I felt also that was quite lacking. I thought only having brief bits of Littlefinger and Sansa didn't really get a lot from it, really. And then the stuff with the Unsullied I thought was interesting for a bit, and then when you get to Daenerys, it's yeah.
You know, I'm gonna kind of simplify it into something that might make people roll their eyes, but basically all the good stuff in this episode, like the vast majority of it, is the stuff that's from the books, and the stuff that isn't so good is the stuff that's not. That's kind of what happened, and that's why it's so patchy like a cow. Because we're at this weird sort of transition phase where some of it is and some of it isn't, and it's real strange. And the stuff that's just Dave and Dan is quite hollow, and the stuff that's adapted is really interesting. But yeah, we'll get into the details of it. I guess given how much you've gone into it already, we'll start with the wall with Jon Snow's sort of storyline.
Yes. Yeah, I really liked a lot of the wall this episode.
This is I think my issue with the wall this episode is not the stuff we got, it's the stuff we didn't get. This cuts out a lot of really cool things. And they just sort of they kind of sliced a corner off the wall storyline and put it there, and the stuff we got was still good stuff, but it's just they've definitely skipped over a lot of the really, really good, like really awesome stuff that happens around this time in the story. One of the things that I love about the scene with Jon and Stannis standing at the top of the wall in the books is that really affirms Stannis as a character, in the sense of I always thought to save the realm I needed the throne, but actually to save the throne... Sorry, I think it's... to save the people I thought I needed the throne, which was his motivation going into Blackwater. But actually it's to save the realm I need to save the people. His motivation now is very focused on what lies north of the wall.
A slight inkling of that a little bit here, but it wasn't massive.
It doesn't have that iconic speech he does, and it's... The problem I have with Stannis at this point in the show is that they aren't fully utilizing all of that character that's there. And he is a character, but he's not as great as he's supposed to be. He's kind of a half-baked version of the same person, and it is a bit frustrating because his main sort of position in this episode is Roose Bolton has taken Winterfell. I am going to take it back from him because it doesn't belong to him. I want the wildlings. Jon Snow, you must make Mance Rayder bend the knee to give me his army, otherwise he will burn. That's kind of it. And and the rest of his character
How interesting would it have been if there was a scene between Stannis and him?
Well, I was about to get to that. So the rest of the episode, his character is carried by the actor's performance because the actor adds a lot of details in to the character that elevate the material. But this is the thing, right? So there's two main points I want to make here about the Stannis side of things before I get to Jon's bit. So the first thing is, at this point in the books, Davos Seaworth isn't at the wall, but because he is here, he does nothing. He just stands there and does nothing.
He's just sort of talking. He's kind of just like the attachment with Stannis, and just expositing a couple things that Jon needs to know about the situation. He pretty much did nothing this episode, unfortunately, which is quite annoying because he's probably one of the strongest characters currently.
Yeah, because Dave and Dan decided not to send his character to White Harbor, which is what he does in the books. They've just decided to have him at the wall with Stannis, and he just sort of stands there and does absolutely nothing.
He's just sort of there. Not even like a bit where he's... Like, because his whole thing has been like, he's very much been against, you know... What's her name again? Melisandre? What's her name? Did I get that right? Yeah. He's been very much against her for pretty much the entire time. So not even getting something of his reaction to her speech is very strange. From a narrative perspective, it's quite strange to not get anything from him. If he is there and he's witnessing this, something that he's witnessed before and something he's been actively against, you'd imagine he would have some sort of reaction to this. Not necessarily doing anything, but at the very least having a reaction. You know?
Do you remember his reaction to the burning of Axel Florent in season 4 was very extreme. And the same thing in season 2 when she burned someone at the stake. It was the same thing. He reacted in disgust.
You'd imagine he would have some sort of reaction to her because of the character he's been. And so what I just like thinking about it now, obviously I very much had the thought of like, he's not really doing anything and he hasn't done anything this episode in any scenes he's been in. Especially that last one where he should have said something.
It's because Dave and Dan didn't give him anything to do because he's not supposed to be there in the source material.
Yeah,
So
but they don't take advantage of the fact that if they're not done what they've done in the books, they've not gone, okay, so what do we do with him? He's been in this situation before and he's had a very clear reaction and, you know, feelings about, you know, Melisandre. Should we do something with him? And they went with no. Or, even worse, didn't even fucking think about what reaction he would have.
now, here's the other half of that. Here's the other half of my issue with the wall. So, the burning of Mance Rayder is a magic trick in the books. It's not real. So what happens is that it's not Jon that goes in to talk to Mance Rayder, it's Stannis. And we don't see the conversation because Jon is the point of view character. Stannis has Stannis and Melisandre have a conversation with Mance Rayder that we don't see. We only hear about. And
I really thought they would have done that because I felt like that's such a missed opportunity.
So the whole point of this, the whole point of it in the books is that Jon Snow thinks Stannis is going into the prison to convince him to bend the knee and fails to. That's what Jon thinks happens. But what actually happens is that Melisandre takes, I believe it's a wildling named Rattleshirt. So you know the one that Eirich calls, I think it's Eirich calls him Rattleshirt, and the Night's Watch called him Lord of Bones. You know the guy with the mask? That's in season 2. So that wildling, Melisandre puts it's like a blood magic spell on him. I can't remember the name of it, but basically what happens is Rattleshirt takes the form. It's a bit like Polyjuice Potion. Rattleshirt takes the form of Mance Rayder, and he gets burned at the stake, and Mance Rayder goes off to Winterfell in disguise. So the whole point is that visually, it looks like Mance Rayder has been burned, but actually he is used as a tool for Mance Rayder to infiltrate Winterfell from the inside. So that's a really interesting twist, because we learn in a scene, which is a Melisandre POV chapter in the books, about that twist. But the problem with the TV show is that doesn't happen. In the TV show, it's actually Mance Rayder that gets burned, and his whole story ends here. And there's also one other thing that's not in this, and that's something that they didn't do in season 4. They've completely cut from the story. Is that in the books, Mance Rayder has a wife who is pregnant, and during, when Stannis' army raids his camp?
Yeah.
So during that scene, the stress of the horses galloping causes her to give birth early. She breaks water early. And she dies in childbirth. So Mance Rayder's wife dies, and she gives birth to his baby. So his heir. He has an heir. And what happens is that Jon Snow creates a plan because he knows that Melisandre will want to burn all of Mance Rayder's king's blood, right? Like, that's like his idea. Because Jon Snow doesn't know about the plan, right? He doesn't know about what Melisandre wants to do with Mance Rayder and Stannis. So his idea is to secretly swap. He basically has a scene with Gilly without Sam, where he convinces her to swap her baby with Mance Rayder's baby. And because they're born like basically around the same time in terms of timeline wise, they're born very close together. And so what happens is that Gilly starts carrying around Mance Rayder's baby, and Gilly's actual child is swapped. So that's another part of the story that's completely cut, is the swapping of the children without Samwell's knowledge. And then there's another thing that they haven't done. Fuck, there's so much. Because that happens, Jon Snow has a scene with Sam where he basically has to bully him into going to the Citadel to research about Dragonglass and all of these things that are related to White Walkers. So there's all this stuff that he wants to research. He wants Sam to go to where the maces are at the Citadel and research about how to stop White Walkers, because obviously it's coming, right? And it's such a great scene because you get 2 POV chapters. You get Sam's point of view in the 4th book, and then you get Jon's POV in the 5th book. And what happens is that from Samwell's POV, his best friend has turned on him, and because of his position, Sam breaks down and believes that Jon has betrayed him and is hurting him to make him go and do something. Whereas from Jon's POV, he's heartbroken internally and doesn't want to do it to Sam, but he knows he has to because of his responsibility. So that's also cut from this point in the story, and Sam and Gilly stay at the wall, and there is none of that. So there's all of these things to do with the wall storyline that just aren't here. They've just been completely removed. And therefore, you have far less tension, far less intrigue, far less twists going all around the story. And in fact, you don't even get a twist in this episode. You just get Mance Rayder being burned. Now, to be fair, like you said, the dynamic between Jon and Mance Rayder is a good one, because it's him cementing his beliefs against Jon's, which are clashing. But they also both come to a mutual understanding of each other's beliefs, which, as an isolated scene and like a sort of an ending to this like sort of relationship they have together, it's a really interesting way to end it. And you have the whole thing of because John respects Mance Rayder, he doesn't want to see him burned, so he shoots the arrow at him so that he dies mercifully instead of being burned. That stuff is all good, and that's stuff that all exists within the source material as well, but it's missing all of that extra detail, which means now Mance Rayder is dead. He's not part of the plot going forward, as is in the books. We don't have the extra child that gets swapped with Gilly's baby, and Davos Seaworth doesn't go to White Harbor. So that's like 4 or 5 different things they've cut in one episode from the Wall storyline, which begs the question of, what do they do now? Now that that's all gone, what do Dame and Dan do with the Wall storyline? That's my main frustration, because and not only have they cut stuff that's like really important, but it's also really good as well. Like the stuff they do with John's story in the books is really awesome. And so, yeah. I think as an isolated episode, it's fine. What they do here is fine, but what it's missing out on is my main issue with it. You're shortchanging a lot of it, and I think that probably comes down to the fact of Dave and Dan wanted to kind of rush a lot of the arcs because of the TV format. But in my opinion, it was a huge mistake. A massive mistake to cut all this great stuff out. Not only because of its, it's obviously expensive. People would say, oh, it's a longer story. That's kind of a trivial thing. The reason why those elements of the story are so important is because of how they impact all the characters and how much tension there is between all these characters and how they develop. And so what that means is now all these characters are going to have their journeys without those details, which means you're going to get less character development, which means you're going to have less impactful story, which means you're going to have so much subtracted from these great characters. And inevitably, once that source material runs dry and they can no longer use it, it begs the question of, well, what does Dave and Dan do with these characters instead? Do they actually have something in their head that they can do with these characters that is worth it? And yeah, we'll get to that in future episodes. But the acting and the direction for that whole Wall stuff was really well done, I thought, for the most part. Especially towards the end. A lot of the tension in the final scene was really well done. Especially, I loved the actor who plays Tormund. His reactions to seeing Mance Rayder burned were fantastic.
Really good. Oh, the acting for the entirety of the last 10 minutes was incredibly good. It was incredibly good.
I almost love the whole thing of when Mance Rayder talks about "this was my home once. I wish you best in the wars to come," and Stannis kind of, the face he gives him, it's almost like he admires it. And that just before he's about to burn him, that really does some of his sort of uniqueness as a character, doesn't it?
There's a lot of really great subtlety from the acting in the last 10 minutes.
There is. I would make one complaint about the direction, though. I think the top of the wall scenes have had a massive downgrade in their cinematography.
Oh, you very much notice they're on a green screen.
Yeah, if you go back to like season 1 especially, like the scenes with Jon and Benjen at the top of the wall are really good. It actually feels cold. It feels
a
like
lot more noticeable.
Yeah, it feels like you're actually in a windy winter, whereas this felt very green screen, and I wasn't a fan of it.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of the TV viewers won't. This doesn't cause concern yet, but definitely around this time of the story, the book readers, the people that had read the books, will have noticed how much they've cut out and go, "Oh shit, what is happening? Where's all my story gone? Where's all this lovely stuff? They've thrown out like 75% of the wall in one episode." So yeah, there's that. We also have bits of Ollie training with Jon, so he's clearly being given some training to actually defend himself.
Yes.
I think some of the dialogue between Sam and Gilly was very average.
Yeah, I also thought that. It was very just, yeah. Especially, I don't think Gilly's actress also was very great in that scene either. Sam forgetting that if you leave the wall, you'll get executed is very strange. It's a small thing, but it was something that I noticed. Like, I don't think that's something he would forget. It's it's a small thing, but
it kind of makes him seem a bit dumber than he is, and they're just trying to make
he's
him
not that stupid.
It's almost like they're just trying to force a joke in for the sake of it.
Everyone is very much aware if you leave the wall, especially given how he went after John in season 2, was it? Like John, or was it season 1? Season 1, where John attempted to leave. That's something that would be in his mind. Yeah, it's very strange. It was a very small thing, but it was something I noticed from that conversation.
And it's just frustrating because the scenes they've cut are some of my favorite scenes for both of them. The scene where Sam gets bullied by John is one of my favorite Sam scenes. And the scene where Gilly has to swap the children and breaks down is one of my favorite Gilly scenes in the book as well. And they've removed both of them and they've given them this really average, not funny, out of character, dumb line. So I don't appreciate that. Alistair Thorne and Janos Slint make some small remarks, and they exist. They are there.
They are there. It literally said, when they popped up, I was like, oh, him, he's there, and he's also there. And then they didn't really do anything. They didn't even have like a conversation about it, considering they're, in charge. I know not properly because Stannis is obviously there, but like.
Well, to be fair, I think
it's
the who is in command has been in flux ever since Mormont died.
It has been. It really has.
Yeah, Selyse and Shireen are there and get no lines, but I will say their sort of polarized reactions to the burning do tell a lot about their characters.
Yeah.
That was something. And, yeah, that's about it.
That's about it for the wall.
And it's funny, because I just criticized a lot of that, and that was probably the best thing about the episode.
I think it was strongly the best part of the episode.
Right. So anything else you want to say about the war before I move on and complain about more things?
Yeah. No, I just think the last 10 minutes, I think, for what actually happened, was really strong. Especially for John. I think John, like I said, John was probably definitely the best character of this episode.
I think my favorite thing about it was the execution, from the acting and the direction was fantastic.
The acting for that scene especially was really good. It was really good.
I think the performance, like the tension between Mance Rayder and Stannis at that end was really well done.
Mm-hmm.
It was such an interesting dynamic of, I'm about to burn you, but I admire your beliefs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, good stuff. Now we move on to something else I have a slight issue with, but we'll talk about the good first. When talking about Cersei, I suppose we should talk about her flashback to her childhood first.
Yes.
The opening scene, where she goes to see Maggie the Frog, who is a fortune teller witch that does blood magic. So
yes,
the idea is that what she said foretells her future. The king will have 20... Well, she says, will I marry the prince? Now, this is for anyone who doesn't know quite how to do the maths, when she says, will I marry the prince, she's talking about Rhaegar Targaryen, because that's who she was betrothed to. That is something that is expanded much more heavily in the books than it is in the show, that Cersei was actually in love with Rhaegar Targaryen first. And that it's not just about Jaime. She did actually quite like Rhaegar as well. And then I think in the TV show, they transferred that to her actually having some level of love for Robert Baratheon, if you remember season 1. That great scene they did.
Yes. Yeah, they had an inkling of like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they fortune tell, you will not marry the prince, you will marry the king. And you will be queen. You will not have children together. Now, this is where the problems start, because remember, do you remember the conversation that Cersei had with Catelyn in season 1? About Cersei's miscarriage.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, so this scene does not make sense because it ignores well, at least in the sense that Maggie the Frog gets the prophecy wrong. Because technically, Cersei did give birth to a child with Robert, but it died shortly after it was born. So, this prophecy ignores that to say that the king has 20 children and she has 3.
Yeah, well, they say in that scene that the child was born. I'm assuming they did.
Yeah.
But it died shortly after.
Yeah. I think they didn't want to mention it because it kind of fucks up the rhythm of the whole prophecy. But that's the problem, right? Is that the scene is written in the books without that extra bit because Cersei doesn't have a child with Robert in the books. So that little wrinkle.
So they've adapted it. They've not changed it to make sense within.
Yeah, they didn't.
Now changed.
They should have, like, if they wanted it to make full sense, she should have added another line in there that references the child that died.
Yeah.
So instead of,
and imagine that being something that Cersei knew as a child. That could be really interesting.
Yeah. So if it was something like, instead of "you will not have children with the king," "you will almost have a child with the king," like something like that would have worked.
I think that's something you can workshop. Yeah, there's something you can do with that.
But yes, Robert Baratheon will have 20, so that's the ones he has all of the whores he bangs, and all the other women. She will have 3. Gold will be their crowns. Gold will be their shrouds. Interesting reference, given that we just saw one of her children die in the last season. With Joffrey. And yeah, that's sort of it for the prophecy. That's really my only issue with it, is that it doesn't acknowledge the fact that she did have a child with Robert. Apart from that, it's quite a good scene, actually. And I really like the match cut they do from her as a child to her as an adult.
Yeah, it's very, very good. Good transition.
The implication of that is that she was thinking about that scene. Like, she was thinking about that memory when she was in the vehicle. Because another one of her family members has just died. So...
Yeah.
Then we get... Obviously, she walks past all those people, like Marjorie and the High Septon, showing her sort of ignorance towards they've come all this way, and the religious tradition, which it kind of foreshadows a later scene, actually. And then we get the scene in the Sept of Baelor with dead Tywin Lannister and Jaime. Your sort of thoughts on that?
Well, like I said at the end of the scene, definitely not on the same level as, the scene from last season, which was quite flawed. I'm not sure how to feel about it, because at times it felt very much... The dialogue didn't flow as well as it normally does.
Mm-hmm.
It very much felt like the whole action. What line was it? Something like talking about like consequences. Like, he built it for us. They're gonna try and take it away. They or them out there are enemies. That kind of dialogue is like, that's not as clean as it normally is. The scene itself, I don't have an issue with it. Like, obviously conceptually, I just felt the dialogue was very much not on par.
The scene is in character. It's just not very...
Yes, it is.
It's just not the level of creative genius that it usually should be.
No, it's not. No,
and
it's not.
This is
for a Jaime Cersei scene, this is quite low down the list of like interactions they've had.
And this is kind of what a pure example of... This is a scene that's not in the books. It's written by Dave and Dan, and George Martin's no longer in the writer's room. So you have them...
They're not great with dialogue. They're really not.
Yeah, like, they understand who these characters are for now. But
For now.
But the writing isn't to the level it should be.
No. The dialogue is very... It's like, it's not bad, but it's quite average. Like, he loved you more than anyone in this world. It's like that sort of lines what I don't feel like Cersei... Like, Cersei feels a lot more cunning and a lot more witty in terms of like, and a lot more sarcastic in terms of how she speaks.
Now, if you remember my big long speech about the last episode of season 4 and what they changed,
Yes.
you would know why this scene isn't in the books, because in the books, Jaime finds out that Cersei was fucking Lancel Lannister and Osmond Kettleblack and the Moon Boy, for all Tyrion knows. And in this funeral scene, there's lots of people in the Sept of Baelor, and Cersei and Jaime are on opposite ends of the room, and Jaime does not want to be around Cersei because all he thinks about when he sees her is her fucking her cousin.
Yeah.
So this whole situation is completely different, because instead of being shell-shocked and full of blood and hatred and bile and trauma, Jaime and Cersei are on relatively good terms outside of the fact that he let his father die. There is a bit of tension there, but it's nowhere near the level of... Like, in this scene, it's Cersei is disappointed with Jaime feels regret. As opposed to Cersei feels disappointed in Jaime hates Cersei. Which is a whole different way of doing it. So you've only got really one half of the story as opposed to both. And that's all because they wanted to make it all about Shay and not about Tysha, which was fucking stupid. Anyway, Charles Dance gets a payday being a corpse.
Yeah.
But again,
the last time we see him. So.
Again, not as excessive with the cuts as the wall stuff, but it's still, you're cutting out half of the story here. Because Jaime doesn't have an inner monologue for this scene, he just has regret. And that makes him quite hollow in comparison to the dynamic that would have been had he known about Cersei's affair with Lancel, which funnily enough does actually come up in the end, like later in this episode. It's just a weird thing of that storyline comes up with her and Lancel, but Jaime doesn't know about it. As opposed to what it should be, in my opinion, is Jaime does know about it, and there's an insane amount of tension between them, which would be far more interesting. And instead of, this really average dialogue between them that we got in this scene, it would be the awesome stuff that they do with them, where Jaime absolutely hates her guts. And, and grows to loathe her over time. But no, they're not. They're on good terms. So what is Jaime going to do for this season going forward now that he doesn't know that information? That remains to be seen. So, not the best start, I have to say. Marjorie does nothing. Meryn Trant does nothing. Mace Tyrell does nothing. Tommen does nothing. Then we get to that scene that was actually quite funny, was the scene with Loras Tyrell trying to butter up to Cersei and her rejecting him once again. That was really funny. Thank you for your kind words. I did really like that.
Yes.
Of course, Pycelle got a small cameo with his sorrows. She just walked right past him, not giving a shit about him. And then we get to... Yes. We get to the return, first time since the Battle of the Blackwater, of one Lancel Lannister. And of course, his father, Kevin, who is the brother of Tywin, is back for the first time since season 2 as well. And he basically explained to Cersei that he's joined this group of sparrows who are like a religious cult.
Yeah.
And I actually thought this stuff with Cersei and Lancel was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You give your thoughts while I fill out my water.
Yeah, I thought it was a decent thing. I think actually this was probably the part that was actually strongest with Cersei. I thought it was good back of, like, the end line. I thought was like, yeah, that's what Cersei would say. I think that was actually a really good way of ending off the scene. Yeah, it's and Lancel just looks very different. It's very, very. I didn't even recognize him at first. Really, it took me a while to recognize him. Oh wait, that's Lancel. He had long hair. Looks very different now. Yeah, and I also really like the reaction of, his dad is just like, oh, sorry for his appearance, but religion has has a place, but to a point. It's like, okay. It's because of your beliefs, that's why. Your personal beliefs. But yeah, I thought the scene between them was actually quite relatively strong. Just her sort of chuckling after he says, like, I pray for your father's soul. It's just, yeah.
It's funny because it's a rare occurrence, but we got a scene where Cersei was the more likable character of the two, which doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't.
But yeah, Lancel Lannister has been through quite the transformation, hasn't he?
He has. He really has. Looks very different.
Yep. But again, how much better would this be if Tyrion had told Jaime about their affair? Oh! It's right there! It's right there! Anyway. So yeah, that does some real good setup, and there's some really funny, quite, like, sort of, sly dialogue there with the sort of, you really think my father needed your forgiveness? You know, you praying for his soul. Cersei clearly not, does not believe, like, care about the faith of the Seven. Which, now that I want to point out something. With the Winterfell, sort of the North storyline, we've learnt a lot about the old gods with like the weirwood trees and whatnot. What's interesting about this is we're getting an insight into the Seven, which is the southern gods. So that's a whole nother part of the world building that they're diving into. And I like the line about how the sparrows wouldn't have come here if Tywin was still on, you know, if Tywin was still alive. So they've taken the opportunity of, now that Tywin has been removed from power, they've now flocked in, and sort of they're now surrounding King's Landing because they know that King's Landing is wounded, politically speaking. So yeah, very, very much appreciate that aspect. Then we have another scene that... okay. I have beef with this scene. I like the comedy in it. I thought the Dornish jokes were hilarious. But I have beef with the scene with Loras Tyrell, Oliver, and Marjorie. So, I really don't like, and I mentioned this briefly in Season 3, but I don't like what they've done with Loras's character, because one of my favourite things about Loras Tyrell in the source material, he was so promised and so in love with Renly Baratheon that he never, ever, ever thought that anyone could replace him. And so he decides to join the Kingsguard, because in the Kingsguard, you father no children, you have no wife, blah, 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 blah. The thing is, in the Kingsguard, it wouldn't matter to him because he doesn't want another lover, so he takes up another role that Renly Baratheon would be proud of, is him joining the Kingsguard. But in the show, they don't have him do that because they want him to marry Cersei. And they also do the storyline where he sleeps with Oliver willingly and then actually enjoys it. I don't like this because it removes his very strong love for Renly Baratheon, which is it's a shame
really
because
character anymore, really.
It's actually a shame because they did a really good job at developing his relationship with Renly Baratheon in the show. They gave him extra scenes in seasons 1 and 2, and they were fantastic scenes, really good scenes. So yeah, I don't like this.
It's not really part of his character at all anymore.
Yeah, don't like what they've done with Loras, with him sort of taking up another lover. Even though it is casual, it's still, the meaning behind it is he's not as dedicated to Renly as he should be. It makes his character seem a lot less honourable.
He really just doesn't have much character in the moment, really, just in general. I also thought the dialogue in this scene was I thought this was probably some of the weakest dialogue in the episode.
It is, yeah. And also the other thing is that
dialogue.
Because he doesn't join the Kingsguard, you don't get the really good storyline they do in the books where you have scenes with him and Jaime Lannister, because Jaime is obviously the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. One of the best things about that is because Loras Tyrell joins the Kingsguard, you get scenes of them together interacting, and it creates a lot of tension. But because he isn't in the Kingsguard, that doesn't happen. And this really is all a result of the fact that they chose to only have one Tyrell brother, as opposed to having Garland, Willis, and Loras Tyrell. Because the difference is that you have Loras Tyrell join the Kingsguard and Willis Tyrell betrothed to Cersei. Now, Willis Tyrell doesn't actually appear yet. He's supposedly at Highgarden and he has an injured leg. So he can't travel. But he's first betrothed to Sansa Stark, the same way Loras was. And he ends up being betrothed to Cersei after. The sort of the wedding that never happens. Now, it's the same thing in the show, except the difference is they play it off a lot more comedically, and it is really funny seeing Cersei just reject Loras Tyrell over and over again. But the chink and the sort of the wrinkle in the story is that because of that, he doesn't join the Kingsguard, and because of that, he doesn't have a role beyond being betrothed to Cersei, and then also they decide to have him sleep with someone else instead of Renly, so they change a lot about his character, and I think it devalues his honor, because that's one of my favorite things about Loras is the way he dedicates his life to Renly Baratheon after his death, and then goes to fight in his honor. It's why, at this point in the story, after Stannis Baratheon has left Dragonstone and gone to the Wall, they send Mace and Loras Tyrell's army to retake Dragonstone in honor of Renly, because if you remember, Renly Baratheon always wanted Dragonstone, because he wanted the Stormlands off Stannis. But they don't do that. And so Dragonstone doesn't... What's happened to it? No one's talking about it. The fact that Stannis has just left that castle, isn't anyone going to go and take it? I guess we haven't got to a small council meeting yet, but that is a very important part of the story, is let's send somebody to take that castle that's just been deserted. And in the books, it's Loras Tyrell that goes there to do it, and he does it for Renly Baratheon. So, another whole chunk of the story removed, which devalues a character, and it makes the story make a bit less sense when it comes to the world building, because Dragonstone is a very, very... it's a castle that people want to have, let's just put it that way. And, yeah, Marjorie enters that scene and is very clearly used to seeing her brother have gay relations with men sexually. So, that happened. I mean, it was teased in season 2, if you remember. I think she said something like, oh, we can bring Loras in here if you want, he can help you out, and then you can pretend it's him.
Yeah.
To Renly. Yeah. Don't think I am particularly fond of what they do with the Tyrells in this episode, to be honest.
No.
Which is a shame, because they're one of my favourite things about Season 4, especially the first half. Lena Headey steals the show, though. She's a great actress. Phenomenal. Her screen presence is just... And obviously, at this point in the story, she becomes one of the main characters, so she's definitely, like, sort of... Because, interestingly, Season 4, she didn't actually have as much to do as she usually does, but now she's become one of the leads. Now that Tywin Lannister is no longer in the story, she's assuming that role in King's Landing. But, yeah, there are just... There's bits and pieces in the King's Landing stuff that is good, especially with like the setup of Lancer Lannister and the Sparrows, but there's also just holes in there. And I think a lot of the King's Landing stuff is damaged by what they decided to do at the end of the last season. A lot of that is having a massive sort of aftershock effect.
Unfortunately.
And speaking of aftershock effect, let's talk about Pentos with Tyrion and Varys.
Mm-hmm.
So, this does not make sense. Why the fuck does Varys support Daenerys Targaryen after he spent all that time conspiring against her with Illyrio and sort of... the whole point is that he sells her to Khal Drogo to set up one side of the Targaryen family, and then there's what is it? The line that Arya hears them talking about in the King's Landing dungeons is the Mama's Dragon. So I'll probably get more onto that in detail in another video later, because I think it's probably not something to tackle today. But When Tyrion arrives in Pentos in A Dance with Dragons, it's not Varys he meets, it's the man that Varys referenced in this episode, his friend Illyrio Mopatis, who appeared in Season 1. He was the man who married her to Khal Drogo, if you remember.
Mm-hmm. Guy who looks a lot like Tim Curry, if I remember.
Yes. And basically Varys disappears and we don't know where he is. And he's got grand plans he's doing behind the scenes, which I will get into later when I explain what those plans are. But yeah, Illyrio Mopatis meets Tyrion at this point of the story and leads him on a journey, which is a very different journey to the one that Varys leads Tyrion on here. Varys and Tyrion meet up at Pentos. After he brings him out the box, he vomits some wine. Tyrion seems very done with life because he's lost everything.
Yeah.
And then Varys proposes, the reason why I chose to help you get out of prison is because number one, Jaime threatened me, and number two, I think you could help Daenerys Targaryen. This is a load of absolute bullshit. This is absolute horse shit, and Varys would never, ever, ever, ever risk his life to do this. This was dumb. This for me is the worst moment in the episode, because this kind of shits on Varys' character.
No,
I mean,
but he
they
did it for
already
the Seven
did
Kingdoms, though. He did it for the Seven Kingdoms.
No. The spider would never do this. The spider is way too smart to do this. The spider does not need to do this. This is
you
fucking
think he wouldn't
garbage.
risk everything by getting Tywin Lannister out of King's Landing?
You mean Tyrion?
And set them sail. Tyrion Lannister. So
risk your life getting a prisoner who's on death row out of his prison cell, taking him across the narrow sea, and trying to convince him, even though Varys would know that Tyrion might say no when he gets there. He might just say, no, I don't want to help her. That's a fucking risk he took there. So this actually makes what he did at the end of the last season even... It actually makes what he does at the end of the last season even worse. Because now we know the reason, and the reason is stupid.
for Daenerys.
Also, why does Varys support Daenerys when everything she does goes against his beliefs?
But she's good, though.
She is not any of the things that he describes. She's not. I know, obviously she wants to free slaves, right? But her manner of doing what she does is so different to what he describes. What he advertises to Tyrion is like a utopian leader, which is, as I explained, a load of bullshit. And it's really funny if you've seen Season 8 where this goes. Where this storyline goes with Varys. I really don't like this change they made. And it all happened because they decided to cut out. And again, like I said with The Wall and with the King's Landing storyline, there is an entire set of characters that no longer exist because of this scene. Very not minor characters, extremely important characters to the Targaryen storyline that are directly tied with Varys, with Illyrio, with Rhaegar, with the Dornish storyline, and with Daenerys, with Cersei. There's so much stuff that this whole thing is removing. And basically what it comes down to is that scene that Arya Stark has in Season 1 when she's inside the dragon skull and she hears Varys and Illyrio talking about the Mama's Dragon. That all gets cut. The Mama's Dragon isn't in the show. And that whole scene in Season 1, foreshadowing that, was completely pointless. It also begs the question, why did Illyrio betroth Daenerys to Khal Drogo then? If that is no longer part of the plan, why did that happen? So yeah, this scene is fucking awful. In terms of the implication for the story. Obviously, the actors are they're charming actors. Peter Dinklage and Conleth Hill are good actors. And they have a few funny lines, and there's some philosophical stuff in there about, Tyrion's nihilism versus Varys' optimism. There's stuff about utopian leaders. There's stuff about his regrets and him feeling depressed after having murdered his love and his father. Like, there is stuff in there that's, you know, worthy of their characters, but purely for the implications alone of how it changes the story and changes it in a way that doesn't make any sense, I really, 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 really despise the scene. And that's my take on it. Although, having said that, it does give us a great gif of him vomiting wine that has been used many times.
Yeah, this scene was very strange. This whole section of the episode was very strange. It just very much just felt like a scene of almost like Nick Fury coming out of nowhere and saying, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative." Something like that. It just felt like okay, now let's move on to something brand new for you, Tyrion. We've got something new for you. The line was fucking, it made me chuckle because it was quite cringe. But the line, Tyrion going, "Good luck finding him," and Varys like, "Who said anything about him?" It was quite cringe. It was quite
it was
cringe.
So telegraphed.
It was.
Yeah.
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 It's just yeah.
Fuck, dude. It's sad as well because the stuff they actually do with the Mama's Dragon in A Dance with Dragons is so interesting. And it's one of the storylines that people are most looking forward to seeing what George does in the next book. Because there's some really... There's one character in particular, like the Mama's Dragon is a young character, but the older character who's looking over him is one of my favorite characters in the books, and he's not even in the show. Cut out an entire house from the story in the show, and it sucks. It really sucks. And instead what we get is Varys being a fan of Daenerys Targaryen, which is just really stupid. There's no deception! Where is the spider? Where is the deception? Where is the fucking plan? Oh, it's so dumb. What are they gonna do? Just walk up to Daenerys and say, "Hey, we can help you"? This dwarf is smart. He's also a Lannister, and he's one of your enemies, but he's one of the good ones. And you're Varys the Spider, the one that trades secrets from Robert Baratheon. Ah, yes, but I promise I'm on your side now. Like, it's just such a terrible plan. How does Varys think this is gonna work? Why does Varys think this plan is gonna work? It's not. All logic states that this is very, very risky. At every point. Oh. Varys is like, "I have a vision that you can help her take over Westeros." It's just, it's fucking fan fiction. Varys is basically just doing what people did on like the Reddit threads. It's like, "Oh, Tyrion's really smart and that's what Daenerys needs." Boom, there we go. That's the story. It's just so simple and it doesn't make sense for Varys' character and it's weird. Ah. But don't you worry, it gets worse from here. This is just the start. This is just the start of this bullshit. Yeah. And also, here's another thing, right? So you know how we have Varys on screen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of my favorite things about Varys not being on screen after Tyrion escapes in the books is that you don't know where he is. And so they do a scene with Jaime where he has what we don't know at first to be a dream. But basically what happens is we have a scene that opens up with Varys walking into a room and Jaime kills him with like his sword. He basically kills him for what he did. And then it turns out to be a dream. So like there's all these little teasers of Varys appearing and then it's just a dream. Or like Tyrion appearing and it's a dream. And Jaime's like freaking out because of what's just happened to him. And like the things he's found out. But that doesn't happen because Varys, number one, Jaime doesn't learn the confessions about Cersei. And number two, Varys isn't off screen, so he's on screen. And like I imagine Dave and Dan probably thought, "Oh, we want to use the actor, so we'll keep him on screen." But it's like surely it's better for the story to keep him off screen and make you wonder where he is and what he's doing.
No, that's totally not part of his character.
Oh my god. Oh. It's just like, it's one of those things. There's little things in the episode, but the more you think about it, the more damaging it is. Also, we have now entered the arc of Bearded Tyrion.
Oh boy. I'm sure that's the best arc.
Yeah, so just for anyone who doesn't know, clean-shaven Tyrion is one of my favorite characters in Game of Thrones, and Bearded Tyrion is one of my least favorite characters. So that tells you what you need to know about him. And this is when, instead of it being a... You remember back in Season 2, the dynamic between Tyrion and Varys? How it was very much like the... You know, power resides only where people believe it resides, and they have that scene at the table together. It's just beautiful. Beautiful character stuff. Well, now, instead of the dynamic being two very smart players of the game sharing their sort of camaraderie in the chess match of King's Landing, it is now and they are now basically an old married couple throwing barbs at each other, and it's really cringe.
No, but the audience loves those characters. Let's have them do funny jabs at each other.
Yep, and guess what? It gets worse.
Because I have balls and you don't.
No! I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it. I fucking hate it so much. Oh my god. Ugh. Alright. Moving on. Moving on to Marine. We have a scene that, well, it's a scene that happens in the books, doesn't it? So obviously, it's a really good scene where White Rat, the Unsullied, goes into a brothel to be nurtured and cuddled by a whore and is killed by a son of the Harpy called Mosador. This is great. This is one of the best things about the episode. The establishment that the Unsullied need to pay for prostitutes to care for them and hold them, because it's something that's missing from their life. They have such a withdrawal of care and love in their life that they're willing to pay for it. And then the Sons of the Harpy slices him in the neck. And then leading on from that, you get a scene with Grey Worm and Missandei where she confronts him about it, and he seemingly doesn't tell her the full truth.
But he does.
Because he has an he has an insecurity about it as well, and he doesn't want her to know.
Yes. Exactly. It's good character building for the Unsullied.
Yep, I love this. Love this stuff. And
that was the best part of that whole section.
Yep, and surprise, surprise, it's ripped straight from the books because it's George Martin being like, "Hey, what is it about the Unsullied?
Let's give Unsullied characters."
Yeah, let's explore what it is the Unsullied are insecure about, and we see it. And this is something they did in season 4 as well, with Grey Worm's insecurity about can he fall in love. It's so good. And yeah, that's the best thing about Marine. And then we get to the scene that you laughed at, which is where Daenerys talks about how she doesn't want to bring back the dragons that Dario is suggesting, because she doesn't want another child's bones at her feet, which is very in character, isn't it?
Yeah, it right now, yeah, it is. It is.
Yep.
Here's the thing, right? Because we know, it's hard to take those scenes seriously. It really is, because they're fucked. Those things are fucked.
Yep, they amount to nothing in the end.
Yep.
So I have something that I did talk about when we did season 4, but I'll bring it up again. I don't like how they've changed the power dynamic in this relationship. I understand why they did it. They did it because of the age jump. Daenerys is an adult in the show, whereas she's a teenager in the books. But one of my favorite things about the Daenerys Daario Naharis scenes in the books is that he has power over her. And she's a developing teenager going through puberty, and she's infatuated with this.
No, but she is leader queen, dragon queen.
Yeah.
Therefore, she is best queen.
How many times do I have to say no?
So cringe. It's so cringe.
Yeah, but
it's just like she really doesn't. She's losing a lot of her initial character. She really is.
She cares about the child's bones. That's for sure.
Yep, that's good. That's fine.
But yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the dynamic between her and Dario in the show because I don't think it's as strong. I think
Why can't we have a struggle to be a leader? Why can't that be a thing? There's like such a lack of like her being like she's never led anything in her life, and these last like 2 seasons there's been such a lack of
But you know how she
learning how to be an actual loved leader.
You know
she
how
has
it's
to make tough decisions.
What was it she said about I don't want this the place I'm ruling to turn to chaos?
Yes.
So one of the best things about the books is the place she's ruling is chaos, and she has to try and fix it.
Yeah.
That's like the whole point of the story.
Like the whole like her, like having her doing stuff like bury the undecided who was killed with honor. That all that stuff is fine. It's just there seems to be a lack of her like struggling of like trying to handle everything.
Yeah. I'm sure those masters won't be happy with me because they were rich and then I ended slavery. Wag my sassy finger.
That line is so fucking... It's like when people like meme about someone who does a speech about racism and says, "We did it, we sold racism." It felt very much that kind of vibe. Like, you know what I mean? Like that the Cody promo in AEW where he talks about racism and everyone's like, "Oh my god, the Cody promo saved saved racism." It's like sort of like that. Like, I ended even though like she like in technical sense, yeah, but it just feels so like the dialogue for it is just so fucking absurd.
So what you're saying is that Daenerys is a heel who thinks she's a babyface.
Well, that's season 8, definitely. That's for sure. a blonde person trying to solve racism / slavery. Yeah. Yeah, but like again, but seriously, like it just really feels like she's like very paint by numbers. She's such an uninteresting character at the moment. Like the scene of her going to see the dragons, I thought was so shit. I'm gonna be honest, I thought that was a shit scene because it's like, firstly, I pointed this out. Why is she going with a light source? That's just fucking weird. That's just very weird to see. Just because they want to get the jump scare reveal of the dragons.
It's just, I want to check on my babies.
I want to check on my babies. Hello, no.
And this is another storyline that they've completely cut as well, just to bring up more baggage. So there's a character in the Dornish storyline that his whole character arc is he wants to see the dragons. Well, it's one of the things. He has other things to his character as well. There's multiple reasons for him to travel to Meereen, but one of the things he does is goes to see the dragons, but he's not in the show. So, yeah, just want to point that out. He's not in the show.
Rip.
But when we get to the Dornish stuff later, that's when I'll address it. One of my favorite things about the dynamic they have in the books is that she knows in her heart that the right thing to do is to follow her instincts, but because she is so sexually attracted to this man, she feels compelled to listen to him, and his advice is really bad. And he's such a delinquent bad boy that it makes him a bad influence on her. And because Jorah Mormont has just been exiled, he now has even more influence over her because Mormont's no longer there. But the thing is, in the show, Dario tries to give his opinion, and she says, "No, I disagree." So that's it. That's their dynamic. He makes a suggestion, she disagrees.
That's pretty much their relationship at the moment.
Yep. Oh man. Oh, why can't she just be so absorbed with this sexy foreigner that she can't help but listen to him? That's so much more interesting than what we got. The whole point of Daenerys' character is that she's too young and she's too unwilling to...
Inexperienced, yeah.
Yeah, she's too inexperienced and
she's
she
a
can't...
character that wants to be loved in a world that's extremely flawed.
Yep, and she can't control her emotions because she's going through puberty. That's one of the best things about her in the books, is that she's going through puberty and can't control her emotions. Whereas in this, she's just, I ended slavery. Of course the rich people won't be happy with me. It's just like YouTube slideshow leftist politics, really. Even though she said I'm not a politician, I'm a queen. Which once again was just, it's very sort of girl power dialogue, if you get what I mean. Now they did introduce one other element. Hizdar Zolarak mentioned that the Masters want to reopen the fighting pits because it's part of their tradition, and she's very much against it. This is something from the books, and it's basically setting up something later in the season. So yeah, that was something that they did. And yeah, there's also like 5 other storylines that they just completely cut that are really interesting. You know, I'll tell you one of them because it happens early enough in the story that it's kind of okay to tell you about. So, do you remember from Karth in season 2, Zaro, Zoe, and Doxos?
Mm-hmm.
And they in the TV show have her lock him in his vault with Dorea.
Yeah, they did do that.
Yeah, and that was really shit. But so to sort of give you a context of what happens otherwise, on the way to Karth, Dorea dies of starvation in the desert. And then Daenerys flees. I've talked about this before when we did the House of the Undying breakdown. But Daenerys flees Karth and Zaro doesn't die. He's not locked in his own vault because that's stupid. Vault of no money. What a fucking garbage twist that was. Anyway, so at this point in the story, Zaro goes all the way from Karth to Meereen to try and marry her, even though he's very clearly in the books gay, which is different in the show. But there is a whole scene of Zaro visiting Meereen and trying to get her hand in marriage, which adds to the story. It kind of adds a whole another element of there's all these people around her who are trying to get some kind of power off her, and she's having to try and navigate all these options and try and find the one that fits. So, for example, Mormont's just been exiled. Daario Naharis is her lover that she's attracted to, but she understands that he's not a fitful husband because he's part of the, Stormcrow's army in the books. In the show, it's just the Second Sons. But he's a sellsword, so you don't want to marry a sellsword. Then there's obviously Hizdar Zolarak and Meereen. There's Zaro coming over from Karth. There's all this stuff going around of she's being offered marriages now that she's leading the capital of Slaver's Bay. And all these people are trying to bargain for power. Of course, instead, they killed off Zaro in season 2 and we don't get that scene. So yeah, that's just another example of another thing about Daenerys' character that they just don't have. And there's all these great character building scenes that just don't exist. There's also the whole thing of Daenerys wants to send a message about the Sons of the Harpy in public. And the fact of wanting the dead Unsullied buried. So she's very much making a big move, and Barristan seems to be very against it, but he goes with her word. Because he obeys her, I suppose. I thought Meereen overall was a mixed bag.
Yeah, definitely.
The Unsullied stuff is the best stuff. The Unsullied Sons of the Harpy.
Yes, because it's character.
Is great. It's real good. Yep.
It's actual interesting character.
It's really easy to spot. Do you remember when Village of the Angels came out? I talked about how it's really easy to spot the Maxine scenes and the Chibnall scenes because of the dialogue.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with this. It's really easy to spot the George Martin scenes, and it's really easy to spot the Dave and Dan scenes because of the dialogue is so different.
Yes. There's actual subtlety.
Yeah, there's substance, there's character development, there's reason for the scene to exist world building wise. It's really interesting. And then the Dave and Dan scenes are, how can we get from this point to this point as easy as possible? Also, now this might just be a production thing, but in the books, the dragons aren't locked in sideways. So you know how it's the whole thing, you enter the pit from the side and you roll the boulder? In the books, it's different. They're in like a pit and you can see them from above.
Right.
So the whole thing of a light source is different because you enter from the top instead of the side. So for the practicality of it is different. So we got a couple of small things left. At the Eyrie, we see Robb and Aaron training with Samwell Stone how to sword fight. Not very well.
Nope.
Lord Jon Royce of Runestone says that he fights like a woman with palsy, which is pretty offensive, but it's something he would say, given he seems like a massive conservative. Wait, I didn't say that. Anyway. Oh, and just to mention Christian Cage again. You have a father, and your father is dead. You could say that to Robin Arryn. You could say that to Sansa Stark, too. There's a lot of people with dead fathers in this show, thinking about it.
A lot of dead dads.
A lot of dead dads. Anyway. So, yeah, we get a crossing at the Eyrie sort of Vale area with Sansa and Littlefinger's storyline and Brienne of Tarth and Podrick's storyline. Because obviously Brienne and Podrick met the Hound and Arya at near the gates.
They did.
Near the bloody gate.
It certainly did.
And they decided not to look around the corner for the Hound's body that happened to be there, which is a really stupid moment.
And we still don't know what's happened to him, obviously, because obviously he wasn't shown. We didn't hear him screaming her name, you know?
Yeah.
Very fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Podrick just wants a job. He just wants to be a squire, of course.
Well, he just wants to, like, you know, be a good servant. You know, do a good job, be a good squire.
Of course, Brienne corrects him because
just doesn't. Yeah.
She corrects him, and this is actually you can see frustration on her face, and this is actually quite a good bit of a character that they do in the show, is the fact that she isn't a knight.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why is they don't really knight women. Even though she clearly deserves it based on her accolades and her attributes.
Yeah.
But actually, that will get addressed in what is probably one of the only good parts of the last season, but we'll get to that much later.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Sansa Littlefinger and stuff, and she's sort of posing with the black hair, going by, well, I suppose, Elaine Stone. She's not called Elaine Stone in the show, she's just called Elaine, but that's supposed to be her role going forward. I would like to point out that Brienne and Podrick do not go to the Eyrie in the books. That fight with the Hound never happens. Nope. And also, Sansa Stark and Littlefinger do not leave the Eyrie in the books either. So Dave and Dan have decided to do something completely different with the story, and we will get to that in future episodes. Boy, oh boy, we will.
Also, the dialogue in this scene also between them wasn't very good. Like,
super generic.
About, where are we going? What are we doing? Just you know, you told Lawrence we were going to the Fingers. I did, but we're heading west. Oh, and also talking about that probably when they've been on their journey for what, hours? It's like
the dialogue between Donkey and Shrek in Shrek 2, but without the jokes.
Without, you know, the good part about it.
Yeah, without the part that actually makes it worthwhile.
And funny. Yeah. Yeah, but other than that, there was really not much else to say.
I just think Robin Arryn being a terrible fighter is really funny.
That was fun. That was quite fun.
Yeah.
It's fucking not, and that being quite a nice transition, like I said during the reaction, like from the previous scene with John to then that scene. You know, quite neat as a connecting tissue.
Yeah. One of my favorite things they do with Sansa in the books at this point is she has to be Robin's babysitter because obviously his mum's dead and his dad's dead.
Yes.
And he's such an insufferable little shit. And at every second, you can tell Sansa is having to hold in her rage because obviously when she slapped him, she got in big trouble and nearly died.
Mm-hmm.
So she's having to hold in a lot of rage and just be very contained about it. And there is a whole storyline that they've completely cut from the show that happens at the Gates of the Moon with a character named Maya Stone, and also another character named Harold Harding. I will get more into detail on that when we get to future episodes when it becomes relevant, but basically all you need to know is Sansa Stark and Littlefinger leaving the Eyrie at this point in the story came to a shock to book fans, because they were like, why is that happening? This doesn't make sense. Why have they changed the story? And I think part of it is because I think Dave and Dan said they wanted to give her and Arya more to do in the show because they really like their characters. And on paper, that's not a bad idea. It's just, what do you do with the characters that it's different? If you're going to do something different, it's got to be good. And is what they do with these characters good or not? That remains to be seen. But yeah, they have left the Eyrie. Littlefinger has decided that they're going to leave the Eyrie. And in future, we will find out why. And you will find out my opinions on that. That's all I have to say. Yeah, any other thoughts you have about the Eyrie scene?
No, nothing really. Nothing really was said of note as of now.
The reception to this episode has been positive. I would just like to point out this is by, aggregated reviews of media article stuff. This is not like hardcore A Song of Ice and Fire nerds like me. This is like Rotten Tomatoes and all that stuff. Yeah, so its consensus is it's a solid season premiere, ratchets up anticipation for inevitable bloodshed while deepening focus on characters and locales. It's been praised as an ostensible lead. Peter Dinklage proclaiming that in the first season the character provided comedic relief, but has since become more central to the narrative. I think he's significantly better in the first season than he is in this episode. I'd like to say that. Yeah. He concludes stating it's a show capable of portraying one character's specific longings as it is widening its gaze to take in the soul-stirring view, and it always leaves the viewer wondering what other lands and adventures might lie over the horizon. I mean, it does do a good job in teasing you for what's going to come in the season. I will give it that. It does do well at that. The series is off to a good start with a solid, though not stunning, premiere. He criticized the episode's character development, saying it's part of the show's harrowing design to constantly thin the herd. But we do reach a point where we run low on character and really care about and connect with and invest in. Well, the problem with that is that there are plenty of characters to invest in and care about, but Dave and Dan aren't using the right source material to maintain that. Miles McNutt, who reviewed the episode, said people who have read the novels positively reviewed the episode, although he criticized the episode's overuse of filming locations, stating that you wish you could spend more than 3 scenes in a given location. He expressed his excitement towards the series offering new perspectives on those events offered by a less rigid approach to characterization and creating new material out of the whole cloth to push the story and its characters forward. I think at this point in the story, I think you kind of had to accept that there's going to be a lot of different storylines happening at the same time because there's so many point of views now that it's just inevitable. However, having said that, there's bits in here that didn't really need to exist, like the Eyrie stuff, but we'll get to why that is. The beginning of Season 5 was a promise of more greatness to come, including that this wasn't the most dramatic episode so far, but the acting and writing was sharper than ever. I would disagree that the writing was sharper than ever. I'd say some of it was, and some of it wasn't. Some of it was really sharp, and some of it was very average. Of course, it was written by David Benioff and Dan Weiss. As I've stated, I think that the parts they adapted were really good, and the parts they wrote themselves were really mediocre to average. And there's one particular scene that pisses me off massively with Varys. It's directed by Michael Slovis, who is new to the show. He directs this episode and the next one, and that's his only contributions to Game of Thrones. I'd probably say his best work happens in the last scene, with the close-ups of the facial reactions to Mance Rayder's burning. I thought that whole thing was done quite well. I wouldn't say the burning was quite as magnificent as some of the stuff we've had in the past. Like the burning of Mirimad's door was very impressive in Season 1. But I thought the direction overall was pretty solid. I think maybe my favorite bits of direction. Like, for example, like I said before, the match cut of Cersei from when she's young to when she's older was really well done. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a massive success in terms of direction, though. I'd say it was just sort of solid for the most part.
I'd say so. I'd probably agree with that.
Yeah. The music by Raymond Javadi. I feel like this episode didn't have as much music as it usually does. Was that just me?
I'd probably say the most recognizable stuff would probably be the stuff of the wall with that the music there was still very recognizable and very good. Everything with that Daenerys, often recognizable music and stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's one of his standout episodes of music, but all the music that was in it was solid. Really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to the tracks of the episode. We have, and that is Kneel for No Man. I would almost be certain that this plays at the end of the episode when he's burned. They did like a real good job of building up to that Warrior of Light theme.
Yeah. Very good build up.
Mm.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good.
Yeah, definitely suited the scene for sure. At least the episode ended on a high. We can say that much.
Yes, it did.
The second track of the episode is called Atonement. Obviously, it's a version of the Lannister theme.
Yes, that's a really good rendition of it.
It is. It's this represents so many things. It represents the sort of the death of Tywin Lannister. It represents the arrival of the Sparrows into King's Landing, and it's sort of the Lannister house atoning for their sins, if you will. But it's also the transition of Lancel obviously being a Lannister and handing himself over to the faith of the Seven. So this sound has a blend of the Lannister theme, but it also has a lot of church, elements to it. And it sort of thematically links the story they're telling with the Lannister, all of the Lannister power now with Tywin dead and with the Sparrows here with Lancel. It's that household being tested with the power of the gods, if you will, and the faith that's around them. I think it's a fantastic bit of music to accompany the story they're telling with the Lannisters and the faith of the Seven, which is a big part of this season. And one of the things they actually kept from the books, and it's a really, really bloody good story. So yeah, I really like this a lot. I very much think that Raymond Javadi captured the story they're telling with the Lannisters and the faith of the Seven here, especially with Lancel and Cersei. And you can very much gauge from this episode that Lancel has atoned for his sins, and he very much wants Cersei to do the same. And she definitely does not want to atone for her sins, because she thinks the faith of the Seven is a pile of bullshit. And she is above it. Really?
Oh, I thought it was quite a good, rendition of it. I like it. Thought a great build-up. Thought the music was very excellent. Love the use of the instruments they used. And yeah, I just like that theme in general, and so to get that sort of a slow sort of version of it is quite satisfying. It's quite nice to listen to. Great for, sort of. It is suited for that kind of scene that it was used for. Yeah, it was really nice. I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah. So going forward with the trivia, bits of it are going to be about the differences in the source material, and bits of it are going to be about behind the scenes. One point I'd like to bring up is that Brienne is quite rude to Podrick in this episode, and part of that is probably because of her frustration of losing Arya. And also the fact that, she doesn't know who to serve now. And I guess Sansa is her only other option, which conveniently she just happens to be right there. But one of the things about the books is that Brienne is never less than polite to him. She's actually quite good with Podrick in the books, so this is definitely very different for her character, but I guess what they're trying to do is she's denying Podrick what he wants, really. And that's kind of part of his character, trying to convince her to warm up to him, which I think they kind of did a bit of in season 4, but probably because of the recent events, it's kind of taken her steps back at the moment, just in the meantime. If this kind of resentment of the situation for her was lasting longer, I think that would be a problem. But when we get to the next episode, you'll see how their dynamic is after she's had some time to cool off. So yeah, I imagine that this was done because of the situation they're in and the frustration she just experienced losing Arya, which is why she's being a bit rude to old Pod. Yeah, so obviously there are no POV characters in the scene where the Unsullied dies in the books.
No.
We only hear about it.
Okay.
But and because of that, there is a bit of a difference. So they have decided to give the Sons of the Harpy those masks because they don't want to reveal. Well, I guess they do reveal the one who is in this episode. But because we don't see the killings in the books, what they do instead is they paint the victims. They paint a harpy in the victim's blood near the body. And they were never described as wearing masks in the books, but I think for the TV show it does make sense because you want to kind of hide their identity in public, in the view of the camera. So I do think it was a positive move that they did, that they used visual symbolism of the harpy mask, I suppose. But the only problem I would have with that is it makes them less stealthy. Because the whole point of the harpy is that you're supposed to not know where they are. So if they're wearing a harpy mask, it makes it quite obvious, doesn't it? I think the way that you fix that is that you maybe have them put a hood over their mask. That might help, but I'm not sure. The other thing that I mentioned when we were doing the reaction is that the scene of them taking the harpy statue off the pyramid happens right after Daenerys takes over Meereen in the books, but I think in season 4 they just didn't have the budget to do that scene yet, so they decided to do it here and save their money, which I can understand, I suppose. But you kind of have to make up in your head in the story that they decided to take their time, if you will. The sort of the series of events that happen in Meereen are very reshuffled because of the season breaks and all that. Like, the whole fighting pits thing happens immediately. The question about the fighting pits happens immediately after she gets to Meereen in the books, whereas they wanted to do all of that and the harpy stuff here and do the child bones thing in the previous season. That's kind of why you get the separation. And also why Hizdahr Zolarak's characterization is very different, because he has to have a reason to exist in season 4. I mean, as a whole, he's very different in the show anyway. He's a lot more... It's kind of what I described about the difference in the dynamic with Daario Naharis, is that because Daenerys is much more dominant, that Hizdahr isn't. Whereas in the books, because Daenerys is a 13-year-old, Hizdahr is an adult who has a lot of leverage over her, I guess you could say, given that he is a royal figure in Meereen. I do think it's interesting that Cersei immediately assumes that Jaime released Tyrion.
Mm-hmm.
That is quite a deceptive guess, isn't it? Because I suppose she knows that Jaime has a fondness for him. I suppose.
Yes. Yeah.
But it is interesting, isn't it? I suppose what they do in season 4 is they have a lot of those scenes where Jaime is trying to get Cersei to think that he didn't kill Joffrey, which might make Cersei think that he's trying to protect Tyrion. There are a few things we still haven't gotten yet. We haven't got anything with Arya and Braavos. We haven't got House Bolton at Winterfell, though they were mentioned. And as I stated in the previous review in season 4, Bran does not appear in this season at all, and neither does the Iron Islands. You have to wait till season 6 for that. Which is certainly an interesting choice, especially in hindsight, given what happens to Bran in season 8. I think about that. This whole season, you don't see the character who's arguably one of the most important things about the end of the show. What are your thoughts on that?
Say again?
Well, in this whole season, you don't have Bran. And he's one of the most important things about... He's one of the most important things about the end of the show, and he's not in this entire season.
That is strange. Oh yeah, you mentioned that last season that we weren't going to get him this season. Like, we don't see him for like ages. That is very strange. When he has been built up as probably one of the most important people in universe.
Mm-hmm. You don't see any of you don't see any of the Iron Islands either. So you don't see Balon, you don't see Yara. None of that.
That's just very strange.
Yep. Oh yes, we forgot to mention about the direction. The first-person POV shots of Tyrion inside the box were actually quite good. You pointed that out in the reaction. You know, when he's looking at the holes in the box, that was actually really well done.
Yes, I did, yeah.
Brienne's rude and impatient attitude towards Pod is similar to Duncan the Tall and Egg, which, for anyone who doesn't know, the spin-off series A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is coming out as a TV show that's based on the Dunk and Egg books. And Brienne of Tarth and Podrick Payne's dynamic is very similar to that, except for the difference is Podrick Payne is not the heir to the Iron Throne. Imagine if he was. So, viewership rating. So last time on Season 4, Episode 10, the viewership was 7.1 million. And the highest we got so far was Season 4, Episode 7, which got 7.2 million. So that, which is a real high number. So, this episode, Season 5, Episode 1, got a viewership rating of 8 million.
God damn.
So it's the highest viewed so far. So between the seasons, people watched the show on HBO and caught on and wanted to watch it live. 8 million viewers. We are now quadruple what it was at the start of Season 1. That is some growth.
Yeah.
It seems like they grow like 2 million viewers every season. When you look at the statistics. Yeah, give your conclusion and a rating out of 10 for the wars to come.
Oh, it's a mixed bag. This was a mixed bag, and the only things that I really, really liked was stuff at the wall. Yeah, there was a lot of really poor dialogue, a really lack of movement for some characters, and some really terrible, like a couple really kind of bad scenes. There's some characters that really are lacking what their characters probably should be in this moment in time. And yeah, the only stuff that I really, really like was the stuff of the war, and John was probably my favorite character of the episode. Probably gonna give this like a like 4 out of 10. I'd say 4. Maybe. No, you know what? 3.5. 3.5 out of 10.
Wow, so just half a point above the children.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Because obviously it's not as bad as that, because there was actually really good characters in this. Mainly John. But yeah, there's some... I was not impressed by the majority of this episode.
They don't have the assassination of Tyrion and Tywin Lannister in this episode, do they?
No. No, they don't.
They do have the...
stuff's already done.
They do have the assassination of Varys, though. And that's very annoying. Yeah, this was a very frustrating episode that, as someone who loves the A Song of Ice and Fire books, they sliced off like fucking... It's insane. Like, if someone gave you a birthday cake and then you slice off 2 bits of cake and you put the rest in the bin, that's basically what they did. And they filled out the rest of it with a lot of very mediocre stuff that was not good enough. The stuff they did with Varys and Tyrion boils my blood. Yeah, and the stuff they've cut out is some really good stuff, and it sucks that they've removed it because it's really interesting, and I think this whole season would have benefited massively if they've kept it in. Instead, they decided to do their own storylines, which we'll get to later. Funnily enough, this is actually one of the better episodes of this season overall, I'd say, in terms of its overall quality, which probably sounds ridiculous. But I'm not joking when I say this one has the least offensive things in it. Because they kind of just move the story along for the most part, but there is some good stuff in there, but I feel like every single scene has a problem. I think some of the performances and the direction and the music is good enough. And there is some stuff I really like about it. I love what they did with the Unsullied. Absolutely loved that. That was brilliant. The reintroduction of Lancel Lannister and having the Lannister house clash with the Faith is a fantastic idea. I don't like what they did with Loras Tyrell's character. I find Daenerys to be a frustrating character that has so many great things about her, but it's not really handled, it's not really used. The Marine stuff in the books is so interesting, and this is just so not. Outside of the Sons of the Harpy and the Unsullied stuff. The flashback at the start misses the fact that Cersei had a child with Robert, which is a big no-no. Charles Dance's corpse is charismatic, I suppose. If that counts. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of really good characters that get nothing to do, like Davos Seaworth, for example. Samuel Tarly and Gilly get a really stupid scene, and it replaces some of their best scenes that don't exist in the show. You have really, really interesting political characters at the wall, like Bowen Marsh and Othel Yarwick and Alyssa Thorne and Janos Slint, that just sort of stand there and exist. And yeah, the end of Mance Rayder is cut short in a way that's different, and it's done in a way that is interesting for this one episode, but doesn't actually do much going forward. And I mean, Melisandre asking Jon if he's a virgin is funny, but I feel like there's more interesting ways you could have gone about that scene. And yeah, this was I mean, it's definitely a sign of things to come, I'll say that much. There was a lot of very negative foreshadowing in this episode, whether that be things that were in it and things that weren't in it. I'd probably give this a 4 out of 10. I'll go slightly higher than you. I think this is a cut above The Children. I think The Children does a lot more damage. You know, I didn't scream at this episode. I don't like what they did with Varys and how they cut up the Mama's Dragon. I think this episode does more to remove stuff from the source material, but the stuff they removed in episode 10 of season 4 was so crucial to the story that it actually fucking explodes my blood vessels when I watch it. Whereas this one was not as offensive, but the very mediocre stuff from Dave and Dan was quite disappointing, to say the least. So yeah, I'll give this a 4 out of 10. Not a good start to the season, I have to say.
No, not really.
Very, very disappointing by Game of Thrones standards when you compare it to the other season openers. Like, last season opener, Two Swords, was exceptional. It was a great episode. You know, the episode where they introduced Oberyn Martell and Arya and the Hound killed Polliver at the inn? That was a great episode. Fantastic. This, however, was not. And, safe to say, unfortunately, it gets worse from here, Callum. So you got that to look forward to. Because this is actually one of the less bad episodes of Season 5. Yeah. Next time on Game of Thrones, Season 5, Episode 2, is an episode called The House of Black and White. Your thoughts going into that episode?
Don't have that much high hopes, that's for sure. Yeah, I guess just seeing what now is going to happen going forward, because I imagine there's going to be some parts that are now going to start moving. Yeah, my hopes are very low right now, unfortunately, after disaster is probably not the best word, but quite poor first episode of the new season.
Yep, it's as someone who has read these phenomenal books they're based on, this season is like Dave and Dan just going in and ripping pages out, like just tearing them out with a lawnmower, and then they put in their own little A4 paper and then they use crayons and they go, this goes here, and then this goes here, and then this goes here. And that's when you get scenes like Varys telling Tyrion, not him, her.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And oh boy, I'll have more to talk about in the next episode. Don't you worry about that. Holy shit. We'll see you all next time for The House of Black and White. I bid you all a farewell. And a good night. Bang!